Welcome to the Sonic Shaman Show, home of the Coffee Connect and Conscious Connections. The show is dedicated to empowering you to perceive, know, be, and express your unique voice in this world without the fear of judgment of others through healing, coaching, and educational services. In each episode, Hank and his guests offer tools, techniques, and inspiration to help you step into your potency. Now, here is your host, Hank Settela.
Welcome, everyone. I have such a special guest with me. Akashic Records, I think, is such a hot topic in the metaphysical community because it's something that is so useful for people to get guidance and healing and all types of things. So I have here with me Joe, and I'm cheating because I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name. So I didn't want to do it wrong.
Figueras.
Figueras.
Yes.
So I have Joe Figueras on with me, and she is an Akashic Soul Blueprint practitioner. And that especially caught my attention because in my tradition of the Paco Cuna tradition of Peru, we have this idea that the Pacarina and the Ituapu, the spirits of the place of your birth, hold the blueprint for the perfected you. And it's like them giving us our blueprint pack that helps us reascend. And I wonder if there's some similarities into how you work with the Akashic Records to how we work with that in our tradition a little bit. Well, could you give us like your, how did you get, everybody has their story about how they discovered their gifts and started to step into actually being a service. What were your stepping stones to getting to the place where you now help people do this healing work and find their unique voice?
Oh my goodness. It was something that I was born to do. Obviously, most people are born to do this work. I've been intuitive my whole life, but I always had this interest in the Akashic Records. And so when I was given the opportunity to learn them, everything just sort of fell into place. Now, most people consider them to be like a library and they help people access past lives. But for me specifically, it was that soul blueprint, right? What is our soul purpose? And so that's sort of where I started.
Now, when you start to work with people, is there a particular thing? Well, I guess you're intuitive, so you just kind of go for it. Do you also teach people how to, not like you might give them information, but how to stay in touch with that blueprint to be like a guiding compass with everything that they're choosing?
Yes. That's sort of the whole foundation. So really what I help people do is sort of discover their soul blueprint and then what causes them to be out of alignment with that. And out of alignment is where you feel stuck and you feel blocked and you feel, like you don't have any direction. And I do that by teaching them how to develop and tap into their intuitive abilities so that they themselves can get those messages and they can follow their intuitive hits and their creative inspiration, because that's what keeps us aligned with our soul blueprint. So it's a whole process.
What I find is oftentimes the case where people start to step into their own intuitive gifts and their ability to connect like that is sometimes we don't want to know what we know, especially when it comes to friends and family. Sometimes like that awareness can be very uncomfortable, like when my aunt was sick and I had the awareness of the sickness. Do you have any advice for people? And as they start to step into that, it's like one thing to know stuff for your own purpose, but how do you like this, filter out the things that or not filter out, because all that is good stuff to be aware of, but how do you balance like the things that you know and how do you work with things that you might rather not know? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Intuitive development is such a self-directed process when you know how to do it, right? When you take a little bit of direction from somebody that can show you how to focus that. So, typically the number one concern that people have when they want to develop their intuitive abilities are, what am I opening myself up to? They're fearful. And so, I start with everything is science-based. I start with, the basics of energy, the basics of our etheric field, our auric field, how we communicate energetically as energetic beings. So at the very beginning, I take the woo out of it and I just talk about the science of it. And that really helps people get more comfortable. Then gradually we bring in that woo.
I love that you call it woo, because I've had people say, I'm too woo-woo for them. and that inspired me to create one of my classes as the science behind the sound. So I took the woo out of the sound part and just spoke to the science and then started talking about the metaphysics of it and things like that. And it was a great stepping stone, especially for the husband or sometimes the wife that gets drunk for an appointment like this. Whoa.
Yes. It's great. And it's also really good for getting that spouse on board, right? Because so many of my clients are, housewives, and they want to, here, hubby, take this crystal. It will help you in this presentation. And, it just helps, I guess, sort of make it a little bit more appetizing for some people. So.
Yep. Now, just taking a step back, because we kind of jumped right into like soul blueprints and everything, but some people might not even know what Akashic Records are. Could we take a step back and just kind of give an overview? And also, when it comes to Akashic Records, are you familiar with other traditions where Akashic Records might be called something different? Because I found that there's a lot of parallels between things. And I'm just curious if you have found that Akashic Records goes by other names and other traditions or modalities.
I have actually the Book of Life, the Book of the Dead. There are some of those, and I haven't gone too deep into it. But that is something I'm a Life Path 7 seeker. And so that's something that I'll absolutely be getting into. And that was numerology that I referenced. But
yep.
The Akasha, it's also known as the Akashic Records, obviously, but I call it the Akasha. And as I began to work within it, I realized that it was an energy that I sort of drop into. And once that happens, then the strength of the messages just increase. And then my intuitive abilities kick in. And like I said, I use numerology, but then also my psychic and mediumistic and channeling abilities. So a lot of people refer to the Akasha as like a library, or they'll see it as like a database, right, of every single thought, word, emotion, action that's taken place in the universe, of every single being, sentient being, all of that. So it really is different for different people. Some people it's a concept, other people it's an actual tangible thing.
Yeah, and in the tradition that I practice, we would call it like a field of awareness,
Yes.
or a field of energy. And through like breath work and through plant ceremonies and through different avenues, people change they alter their state of consciousness, and then they can more easily access those things. But the idea is like pick something to start training yourself to access it when you don't need it, so that when you really do need it, like you can drop into that way more quickly. Because sometimes you need that in the moment where you have the trauma and drama going on.
Yes.
And do you have any tips for that? Like as people start to really learn this stuff, how do they, if they just get blindsided by somebody at work who's a real a-hole or something like that, like what can they use to start to step back into that responding area instead of reacting area, and tap into that knowing where they have an intuitive nature of how to deal with people like that?
So one of the very first things that I teach during my intuitive development course is energy management, right? How does an energetic being, or typically empath, how do you manage that energy? Because within your energy field, that's where your emotions are, your triggers are, your actions, your reactions, all of that. So I teach people how to sort of claim sovereignty over their energetic field, right? Deep breathing, bringing in the light. It's not a shield. It is standing in your power, claiming your space and claiming your power. And that really helps people, keep out that energy that's a little bit more overpowering or triggering, and helps people stand in their power.
I love that you said it's not a shield, because one of the things that one of my colleagues, his name is Ryan Dean, he has a whole course called Empathic Empowerment Training. And he teaches you absolutely don't shield, because what you resist persists. And if you try to hold all this stuff out, eventually you're giving energy flows where attention goes, and you're actually feeding the thing that you're trying to keep away. And eventually it breaks down the wall, and then you end up having like a breakdown. So instead, you learn to be like the hollow bone, and like it's just the energy that you let flow through, and it's not necessarily impacting you then.
Yes.
And another corny rhyme: if you name it, you claim it. So if you judge what you're aware of, then it's like you really own it. Now, a couple of people just tuning in. Angela's been waiting for this topic, so thank you so much for joining us. She wanted to learn more about this. If you have specific questions, Angela or anybody else watching, please let us know. Now, Mary Davis, I do believe she is also an Akashic Records practitioner, if I remember right.
Wonderful.
And she was just curious. Like, well, we already started diving into this. We must have been psychic that this was going to be a question. So we already talked a little bit about the Akasha and how it's a field, but how does it work for you when you start to tap into that energy?
Specifically, it is an energy that comes over or that I drop into. It's like I feel this warm sort of blanket just kind of come over me. And then it's amplified based on the spoken words and the emotions of the person that I'm reading. So the more that they speak about their emotions or how they're feeling or describe something, then the stronger that energy is. And then I perceive it. That's when my intuitive abilities kick in: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, all of those. And so then it becomes just a back and forth conversation.
Yep. And then a follow-up question that she had posted: what does a soul blueprint look like, and what does it sound like? What does it feel like? Just to add the other one in, like, what is that exactly? And are we wrong if we're not following it? You know, like that's the other question. Like, so many people might feel like, well, if I'm 40 years old or however old we are, and now I'm just now getting into my blueprint, is it too late for me to start? Like, questions like that, I think are really important to answer.
It's never too late to align with your soul blueprint. So for me, I see it psychically as this beautiful blue tapestry with like silver threads. So it looks, for all intensive purposes, like a blueprint or a constellation in the sky. But what it feels like, well, I said that it's sort of, right, like I sort of drop into it. Mm-hmm. But it's never too late to align with it. That is like our personal GPS that we wrote during the life between life stage. So our higher self, our oversoul, knows everything within that. And then because we have the ability to bring in free will, all of those choices that we make will all take us down different paths, but all roads lead to ascension. So regardless of which way we go, what choice we make, and where we end up in our life, we're still working towards ascension.
Yeah, and an interesting thing with astrology, just to throw in, when I said, when is it too late? In astrology, they teach that if you go completely on the unconscious autopilot of the universe, the first 28 years is you being programmed. The next 28 years with your Saturn return is you unprogramming yourself. And the next 28 years is you actually stepping into who you came to be in this world. That's like 56 years down the road. Now, that being said, the more conscious you are, the less astrology matters, but it never doesn't matter. So like Pinocchio, once you become aware, you don't have to go with those flows and autopilot. You can fast track your implementation of the blueprint.
Yes. And that tracks with numerology, numerology is the modality that I use to get the foundation of someone's blueprint. So I think of numerology as the bones of the soul blueprint. And then all of our choices and decisions and circumstances are sort of the skin and the flesh, and just to sort of liken it to anatomy.
Now, I'm just putting up here for the people that are here listening on the podcast. If you do want to reach out to Jo and connect with her website, if I'm reading it right, is the Akashic.com, which is the WOKEAKASHIC.com. If you want to check that out, and it will be in the description of the video as well. So one question too, when we start thinking about Akashic Records and tapping into our own intuition, is there any ethical things where, well, what if I become aware of something in somebody else's library, if you will? Is there, how do you use awareness maybe of something going on in someone else's world in an ethical way to make choices that create possibility and not just to manipulate people?
Ethics are huge, especially with the Akasha, because you have access to so much. You have access to everything. But for me personally, because I help people align with their soul blueprints, and my primary focus is where they are in this incarnation, I just don't receive any negative information. It's all of the light. It's all from spirit guides, guardians, and angels. I recently had a client who has a terminal illness, and so she knows that her time is coming, and so her guides stepped in to tell her, well, this is why, and this is what you can expect on the other side. So the messages are beautiful and uplifting in that manner, but they also help us to get into alignment, to live the best possible aligned life here now, because we have work to do. We have that soul blueprint to sort of bring to fruition.
Yeah. And Mary Davis was just saying that she sees the events of the soul's journey when she's in the records, and that's how she sees it. And I also remember she did a reading for my colleague Ryan, who I mentioned earlier, and she saw all this information from past lives, but it made a relationship that was going on in the current lifetime that much more relevant, and why the connection was so amazing. Do you find that past lives really come through, and how,
Yes.
in part to me, I for me, like when I do past life type of things, it's usually when a person has a resistance to hearing what's going on now. But I find that it's like a great way to connect dots and see parallels and themes that keep showing up. Is there something specific you use with the past lives to kind of incorporate into the soul blueprint where you're going in the future?
Yes, absolutely. At the beginning of the session, after I pull their numerology chart, then I'll go into channel. And typically it'll either be a message from spirit or it will be a past life. And that past life will it'll be the source of the challenge that they're experiencing or the question that they have. So they'll either show me a series of past lives or one specifically, and then I'll reveal to them that past life. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, wow, that's exactly what I'm dealing with now. So I don't reveal the past life until, or I don't ask them what they're here for until after I reveal the past life.
Very interesting. So you kind of go about it a sneaky way.
I do. Right.
I'm just reading Mary's comment. Natural adepts perceive in their own unique ways, and the guides seem to step in to prevent misuse and abuse of the power of information. Oh, so I see. She's saying like for people not to have those ethical things come up, like guides or intermediaries will make sure that you're not getting things where you're going to thwart somebody else's will. Yeah. If I'm understanding Mary's comment, yes. I never thought about that. That's a good way. So you don't have to worry about getting information that's going to be abused necessarily.
I don't. And, all of the messages that I get they help empower people and help people grow. And, and honestly, again, there's an ethics thing. And I really, really take, there's a lot of integrity in my readings because I want people to have all of the information that they need to be able to move forward. So.
Now, have you ever had somebody when you give them the reading, they're in a huge space of resistance, like what came through is not what they wanted to know, and if you know that's their soul blueprint, how do you give them an invitation and hold the space for them to maybe step into that space where they can start to fulfill their blueprint or step into that? Or can you just totally change the blueprint? Can you be like, I don't like that, let's rewrite it?
Well, typically. For me, the resistance is more that what I'm telling them, they say that doesn't sound like me. That's not me. That's not, and so once I get that energy of resistance from somebody, they're not going to be open to anything that comes from the blueprint or their spirit guides, guardians, angels, loved ones that have passed over. They're just not going to be open to anything. So, I try to make it as simple as possible by asking them, what is it that you're hoping to get out of this? If it comes to a point where we are just not a good match or whatever, then I'll have a discussion about it. We'll talk about it and I'll try to refer them out to somebody that can better help them. So, yeah.
But if you're like me, that probably doesn't happen very often because you tend to attract people who are really ready to heal. And then,
it does.
When it happens though, just to share one story, I was doing a reading at a store called the Goddess Elite, which is local to my area. And I did the reading for one person and the next person sat down and immediately I just felt like, this is a whole different energy. And I said, you don't really want to be here, do you? They're like, nope. They drug you here, didn't they? She's like, yep. I'm like, we don't have to do this. They're like, great. And that was the end of the reading. And as she was leaving the store, she turns around. She's like, if and when I am ready for a reading, you're the one I'm going to come to. So even when you set that when things like that happen, if you can hold an integrity, that could be the turning point when they are ready because you held the space to not judge them for not wanting it.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important for me to have a conversation with them instead of, being like upset or mean or whatever, just have a conversation about why I don't feel you're ready, because you have to still hold space for that person. Even if you can't open or help them open to the messages, you still have to hold space for them. And so you do it with kindness and integrity.
Now, I'm curious, because you put down about numerology, you mentioned it a couple times. Yeah. Like how do you incorporate, or are they two separate things for you? Do you start to incorporate that? Because I know I had a numerology reading done once where it was just based on my name and it blew me out of the water. Yeah. It took me 3 years to listen to spirit. They kept saying, you need to go get a reading from Patty. You need to go get a reading from Patty. And then I finally did it. And then I was just like, why did I wait so long? It was like spot on. So how do you combine the two?
Mm-hmm. Oh, numerology blew me out of the water the first time that I had. So like I said, numerology, I can think of it like the bones of the soul blueprint. So I'll pull their core chart. There's 5 numbers in their core chart: life path expression, soul urge, personality, and birthday number. And then all of those numbers, when I read them, I read the number, not the person. And every single time the person is like, you just nailed me. And I was reading the numbers, not them, but those numbers are amazing. And so, like I said, I look at those like the bones of the blueprint.
Yeah, and just another comment that you hope that it's okay that you're absolutely fine to be here. If you have any questions, invite everyone. If you have a question about numerology, about the Akashic Records, about anything, like I like to follow the energy of the group. If there's a question that is stirring in you from what we've talked about so far, go ahead and make a comment. We can go down almost any rabbit hole that people like to go down. I hope you're okay with that too.
Yeah.
But sometimes people are all just quiet. They want to eat, or do whatever they're doing at home. But we definitely welcome questions. And so that was the numerology part. And as you're doing that, does the Akashic Records kind of come in, or you keep those two parts separate?
No, they're all connected. They work beautifully together. I also incorporate astrology, the sun signs, new moon signs, and rising signs. So all of the different modalities work together really beautifully. The Akasha is the energy that sort of, like I said, just sort of drops in. And that's, it just sort of, it amplifies my intuitive abilities, my psychic abilities, and mediumistic and channeling abilities.
I just heard an interesting question to ask you. So you have the soul blueprint here, and this is like the perfected soul. Now, what if karma from a past life has promises, commitments, agreements that were made but aren't necessarily part of the blueprint? Because I feel like that might be some of the resistance people have moving in. Do you do anything to get rid of things that maybe were agreed to in a past life that are no longer serving like the end goal of the soul? Oh, look at that corny rhyme. I love that. End goal of the soul.
Absolutely. One of the things I always look for are vows, right? Because in order for somebody to align with their soul blueprint, they have to first see what challenges are keeping them out of alignment. And so one of the things that we'll look at is, what vows have you made? What past life vows? What, proclamations, that sort of thing. And so honestly, if one of my Akashic readings, or the way that I do Akashic readings, we look at like the full spectrum of what in the world could potentially be keeping you out of alignment. And anything past life is 100% game.
Yeah, and that's also sometimes it could be energies that we don't even have a conscious memory of. And
right.
like with the Western mind, we want to know what we're throwing away, but it's also like just the ability to identify the energy. And sometimes what I tell a client is, we're just going to tell a story around it. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. We just need to give it a framework so we can throw it out, and you're being willing to let it go. Angela was asking a question. How does one get to the space of getting to the Akashic Records area? So we're thinking maybe like brainwave frequencies like theta, or altering your states. Like, what tools do people get to so they can access the field of energy? I know it comes easy for you, but you've been doing this over 20 years, if I remember your bio correctly.
I've been an intuitive for 20 years. I've been reading the Akasha for maybe only 2 or 3.
Yeah, so for somebody who's just starting off, like just saying, hey, I want to go to Akashic Record Boot Camp, where do they start to enter into that space?
It's a prayer. I channeled my own prayer, but there is a common prayer out there called the Pathway Prayer that they can Google, and it's free. It's all over the interwebs, but it is a prayer. So it's an intention. And, prepping somebody, I do have an intro to Akashic Records class, and we go through the history of it, but really you have to be able to take yourself down into the alpha state, and to reasonably solid alpha state. And then, at that point, you just have to practice, and you'll start to feel that energy get stronger and stronger and stronger. And then more information will come in, depending on if you're opening your own record or you're opening the record of another. I recommend a certified class.
Yep, and I just posted a link to a PDF that I found on Linda Howe's site that had the Pathway Prayer. And I don't know, are we allowed to read it?
Yeah,
if I have it here. So here's the prayer for everybody, and then I'll share one that I have from Fellowships of the Spirit, which is from Lilydale, which I use for all reading work too. But the opening prayer. Actually, you know what? Let me share it on the screen so people who can see it, you guys are going to be able to read along. And if you're listening to this on the podcast afterwards, then you can catch it. I'll have a link to the PDF in the description. So let me share it here. Okay, I had too many tabs open. I got confused which one it was, right? Share screen. Pathway Prayer, here we go. And now I gotta actually add it to the stream. So here we go, everyone. So here is the Pathway Prayer. And so we do acknowledge the forces of light, asking for guidance, direction, and courage to know the truth, as it is revealed to our highest good and the highest good of everyone connected to us. O Holy Spirit of God, protect me from all forms of self-centeredness and direct my attention to the work at hand. Help me to know myself, then your first name of individual being and the first myself and first name of the individual being read in the light of the Akashic Records, to see myself and first name of the individual being read through the eyes of the Lords of the Records. Well, that gives me a question now, and enables me to share the wisdom and compassion that the masters, teachers, and loved ones of me, first name and individual being read, have for me, him or her. The records are now open. So when I saw Lords mentioned there, what are the Lords of the Akashic Records?
So there are several different sort of possibilities. Okay. There are the Lords of Karma, and the Lords of Karma make sure that the karma that we accrue is actually given an outlet for balancing within an incarnation. But then there are also the librarians, and the librarians are the keepers of the Akashic Records. So, and then there's a council that I often will, meet or see in some of my meditations and experiences within the Akasha. So it typically seems to be some sort of governing body or, beings that really just make sure that everything stays in balance.
Now, Emmanuel was asking a question about what then am I looking for? Example, light symbols. And I think this is, I was trying to click off one comment and another one comment came up, but my everybody has different gifts. Like I remember watching a podcast of yours before we scheduled this one. You were talking about like the different gifts, being clairsentient, being claircognizant. So like it's a field of energy, and how people perceive those fields could be very different for you and for me. Yes. And one of the drawbacks when people start getting into this work is they start comparing themselves, and they say, well, so-and-so sees this and so-and-so hears that. And like my gift was just knowing, like my one friend always joked with me, like from Game of Thrones, like I drank and I knew things before I got sober. Yeah. Because I didn't see a spirit. I just knew when I tapped in. But what are some of the examples of different ways? And do you have advice, like when people have one modality that might be a strong suit, is how to branch into the other modalities maybe a little bit more easily?
Yes. So what you're going to see and experience is going to be based on your strongest intuitive ability. So you want to figure out what that is, right? And the easiest way to do that is, how do you learn? What's your learning style? If you're a visual learner, your strongest ability is going to be clairvoyance. If you're an audient learner, if you like to be explained, then your strongest ability is going to be clairaudience. So you just have to figure out what that is, right? And that's the one that you will practice the most. And as you practice and you get better at that, then those other abilities, clairsentience, claircognizance, which is your ability, those will come in a layered effect. And then eventually they're just working together beautifully, symbiotically, and you don't really know. It becomes less important to know which are at work and which are at play, because you're just receiving these messages. You can see them, you can feel them, you can hear them, and you trust yourself. So that's really sort of the flow of that.
And for anybody looking to get into that work, I think that Fellowships of the Spirit is one of the schools in Lilydale, which is one of the oldest spiritualist communities in the country. And as part of their program, per year, you have to do 70 documented readings and 70 documented healings for 2 years. And within that time span, there comes this tipping point where you're practicing, you're playing around, but people are giving you validation. And there comes to this place where you have this tipping point where you start to know that you know that you know. Yes. And that only comes with practice. But people kind of get discouraged sometimes when they start, if they're not right on the money or if they start comparing. Yep. Do you have tips and tricks or things that you use to motivate people that are really starting to step into their gifts, and not just to be a reader, but even just to use it for yourself? It's like having your GPS turned on. Like, would you want to go now without Google Maps? No. You want to, even if it's the wrong direction every once in a while, it's a really good tool to have. Yeah.
So, okay. Well, first off, I want to tell you that Lilydale is a bucket list. And so I'm really envious that you have spent time there. But secondly,
if you ever go, I'm 3 hours away. I can show you the ropes. Yeah, so definitely,
Absolutely.
if you when you're ready to check that off the bucket list, let me know and we can create a little bit of fun out there.
Yes, definitely. But for people, when I work with them, I try to make it fun, because some of the best experience of intuitive development is when you start to trust yourself, or when you blow your own mind, or when you receive a message and then you get validation. We're always told not to compare ourselves or not to look outside of ourselves for validation. But when it comes to intuitive development, that's what you need. You have to have that validation, because that's what builds confidence. So I try to make it really fun along the way, and really prep people up, like, oh my God, you just nailed that, and really see, sort of how wonderful they're doing and how far they've come.
And another thing for people too, like, even if you get it wrong, like maybe the message that you gave them, they're going to go tell somebody, and all of a sudden it's going to make sense because it was for somebody that they knew. I've had that happen a couple times. And thank goodness the first time I was doing gallery readings at a church as part of my practicing. And Spirit told me before I got up there, like, you're going to get up, you're going to go to this person, and everything you say is going to be wrong. And I was like, really? Everything I say was going to be wrong. And then, so I went up and I gave all this wrong information for this guy, and then two that went fine. And afterwards they came up to me and they said that, they always wanted to do this work, and they looked at me as a professional, even though back then I was like totally out of psychic boot camp, if you will. And they said, well, if you can even make mistakes and it's all good, then maybe I can do this too. And so, like, even being wrong for that was the message for that person, for them to get the confidence to step in. So like, never doubt, like the message that you get isn't spot on for a purpose.
Exactly. And, even, for as long as you and I have been doing it, and all other, long-term intuitives out there comes a point when even I sort of doubt it. The other day I had a reading where this woman came through, and it was a grandmother, and I needed to give my client some evidential, details. I'm not an evidential medium, but when they step into a reading, I like to at least give them some proof. And she kept showing me her hands, and I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't mention it because I was like, well, I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to say it, because quote unquote, what if I'm wrong? And then through the course of the conversation, I said, well, that's interesting, because she kept showing me her hands, and the client was like, oh my God, yes, because she had carpal tunnel. And so she was always rubbing her hands. And I had asked the Spirit, show me something that's going to help my client know it's you. So even I doubt myself sometimes.
Yeah, and that's where my teacher would always say, you get the symbology or the message. It's not necessarily your job to interpret it. It's, that's meaningful for the client. And that hit home because we had to have these sheets filled out when we did our practice readings. And I brought in just one thing and say, oh, I see this hummingbird around you. And I gave all this other information that I thought was like so spectacular. And then on the little sheet, what was the most significant thing about the reading? Hummingbird. And I'm like, I didn't even focus on that. And then I'm like, I should have, but that's a good message for people who are getting readings. Like, sometimes readers really can contribute more to you if you give feedback.
Yes.
If there's something that is meaningful, instead of being one of those, well, I'm not telling you anything, because you kind of get out of it what you put into it, from the reader side and the getting read side, right?
Yeah, especially in the Akasha, because like I said, the Akasha is built on the spoken word. It's built on the energy of words and emotions. And so, I tell my client right away, look, I'm not going to be that psychic that's going to blow you away, but I am going to ask you. So what will happen is I'll see something and I'll say, this is what I'm seeing. Tell me about that. And then they'll go into this big thing about why that's, pertinent. And then that's what raises the vibrational energy of that. And then more and more details will come through. It's like I'm able to pick details out of the Akasha, because the energy gets so dense with their emotions, and we're working off each other's energy. So for sure, it's definitely important.
Now, a question that's coming to mind too, or kind of a statement and a question. I feel that everybody's intuitive to some degree. And we have these times that in these moments of congruency, you just tap in and you know, and it might be intermittent, but people don't trust that. It's like that gut feeling. And then they start to talk themselves out of it. So people that are starting to tap into their intermittent gifts, what tool to know when it's from source or the Akashic Records or from a guide, and when to know that it's just your ego messing with you.
Right. Okay. So, so I'm gonna go off of memory. So I recommend everybody do some research because this information is out there. But typically, there are three voices that come to you: ego, your higher self, and your spirit guides. So whenever it's from ego, I feel it in my gut. It's doubt. It makes me fearful. It's doubting, right? But when it's from my higher self, it feels inspirational. It feels like I can do anything. And when it's from my spirit guides, it comes into my right ear, because that is where I receive all of my information. Sometimes something will come into my left ear. It's typically like a download. So, but still, that might be reversed for some people. So the location of where you're receiving these messages, it might be a clue as to if you're hearing from ego or you're hearing from your spirit guides.
Yeah, and I have the acronym for ego, which is edging God out. And
Yeah.
ego only knows past data. So normally that's the voice too that says, well, but what about this and what about this? Almost a thing that tries to talk you out of your knowing. Right. And then to your point, everybody is a little bit different in terms of where they receive information. So if you can start mapping it, and just to give everybody a little thing that I learned at fellowships is the body's like an antenna. And if you watch mediums, especially at Inspiration Stump or on TV, you'll notice that when they're getting a visual, they're looking up. When they're feeling, they're looking down. They're doing this when they're getting an audio, getting a past life. Watch how many lean forward. Yeah. And so like if you start to copy the physiology of the people that you're watching that are doing this type of work, you can reproduce the same effects much more quickly. And now Emmanuel was coming up with something with empaths. I'm what they say is a high empath, or I like to call those empaths on steroids, perhaps. Yeah. it becomes difficult sometimes, hard to judge intuition, but I also have a strong sense of knowing, just difficult to sort out with so many things. And empaths, that is like one of those gifts, like where you're picking up in the field, like other people, places, things, entities. Like it's not just related to people or even the energy of a land. So how does an empath start to, because that's kind of like all these gifts coming together sometimes at once with an empath.
Definitely. Especially if you're an HSP, like a highly sensitive. So it starts with, again, claiming your sovereignty, claiming your energetic field, learning how to manage your energetic field. The very purpose of an empath is to be a channel for source energy, to be able to transmute, alchemize, that sort of thing. So learning how to, claim your energy field, but also having some discernment techniques in there, right? Taking stock of how am I feeling right now in this moment? I'm feeling a little bit happy, maybe a little bit nervous, maybe a little bit anticipatory, whatever, right? You figure out what your feelings are. Then when you go into a store or a meeting or something, if there's a shift in that, that's not mine because I was not feeling that, right? So that's not 100% every time because emotions change, but it's a really good way of learning discernment so that you can then learn to manage those emotions. And what's not yours, get it out of there. Tell it, no, be gone.
Yeah. And Access Consciousness, which is one of the key modalities I practice, we have a tool called Who Does It Belong To? Yes. And there's even an app you can download on Apple or Android called Who Does This Belong To? It's free. And you set it up and it will just give you this random little ding. And that is the empath's reminder to, in that moment, say, who does this belong to? And if you can do that over like 3 or 4 days, you'll be surprised when you ask that question, how much you find out is it yours? And it's really starting to just step out and notice it, because if you're on autopilot, everything is just coming in.
Yes.
But when you can, start to notice, hey, is this mine? No, it's not. Return to sender with awareness. And it's not even to give it a zing or anything. It's just return to sender.
And of course, there's an app for it. Good Lord. Isn't that hilarious? I'm going to check that app out, though. I'm going to have it on my phone. Is this mine?
And Access Consciousness is like a huge thing. And I want to let you know about this too. Like when people have like the resistances and the contracts and agreements and all that, in Access, we would do a clearing statement for it. So like, are you willing with, what's the clearing I want to do? Give it to me, Spirit. What energy can my body, being, and beyond be to effortlessly break all the commitments, vows, promises that no longer serve my highest and best on my soul path? Something like that. And you let that energy come up, and then you ask the next question, and every word where I'm not allowing that. And then that brings up all the resistance, and that they say pot and pock, destroy and uncreate it, basically. And it's like a great tool to identify the energy you want to step into, identify the stuff that's not letting you get rid of it, and then just move right through it.
Yeah, I have a wonderful friend, Lena, who used to do bars before I moved across country, and I miss it. It was such an amazing session.
Cool. And we have Angela just contributing that. Wow, that's really cool. I'm going to get the app right after the show. Thank you. You're welcome. Like that is like one of the go-to apps. And I know Magic Mikey always has it. And we're doing a class or anything, you just hear bing, and it's just going all the time. And it is really a great tool, because the little robot, man, that's the hardest thing, is to get the robot to stop driving and showing up for your whole life. And the main thing is just to notice as soon as the robot starts driving, say, no, I'll drive. And you'll be surprised how much time slows down. You have way more time because you're responding through life instead of reacting. It's in that reactionary mode that we go, wow, 3 years just went by. What happened?
Absolutely. I'm excited too. I'm going to get that app.
Cool. Now, I'm curious, like, because you have a really rich background in history. From all the things that brought you to being able to offer the readings and the Akashic Records as a tool for people, what do you feel is most relevant for people to really know, or maybe even something to inspire people? What have you found inspires people to even start seeking? Because that's sometimes the thing that, like, people don't even know that they don't know something. And then once something like starts to cut through and allows that impulse of the soul to start coming out, like what's that can start to wake people up? What's the inspiration that might, make them start seeking?
Honestly, what I find, all of the clients that I work with, there's a catalytic event in their life, some sort of catalytic event that has caused them to question who they are. Who am I? Empty nest syndrome, that sort of thing. Now, who am I now that I've, raised kids for 20 years or after a divorce or a death in the family or the loss of a job or some sort of life altering event? That's when people start to question, and they want to know. They say, everybody says this too. They say, I know that I'm supposed to be doing something. I just don't know what. So their higher self is telling them, you're supposed to be turning down this path. And so you need to, get help in doing so.
Yeah, and that's where finding when picking a reader, the biggest thing is like who resonates with you, who has the medicine for you. Like, you've given so much great information, and I love the blend of numerology and Akashic Records. Are there any other? I think there was one other one that you had mentioned in your bio, like that you incorporate.
Astrology.
Astrology and life between life. You mentioned that at the beginning, life between life. And the reason I want to dive into this too, in the Paco Kuna tradition of Peru, there's like one particular journeying technique where, like, say your soul contract while you're coming here, the ability to go and go to that place that's in between lifetimes and renegotiate it. And so I kind of alluded to that question too, but have you ever had someone where, this is like, maybe they're so far on their path and they're so swinging with it that, well, what if I could create more? And like, so is there ability to go to that in between lifetimes and say, hey, we need to up the ante and let's go ahead and create more in this lifetime or anything like that?
Oh my God, that's a fantastic question. I'm going to be very honest. I don't know. I mean, I'm so focused on helping people get to a comfortable place in their life now, right?
Well, just wait. Now that all the clients are going to start coming to you like, man, I'm just rocking it. How do we up the game? But there's this whole thing, this journey work that you do to get your contract and renegotiate it. Either if you think it's too hard and you want to downgrade or upgrade, or just have something different show up that then would be an alignment. I like to think of it. Have you ever seen the musical Into the Woods?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I like to think of everything like that. Like, all of life is like all the fairy tales happening at the same time in the same forest, interacting with each other. But the cool thing is, you're the actor, you're the director, you're the stage crew, you're all the people in the play. So at any point in the right space, you could do a rewrite. You could go off the cuff. And as long as you can bring the entire being together with it and be congruent with it, then you can have ease. But if it's like the ego wants to do it, but the soul's like, no, we're supposed to be over here, that's where you have things not line up in your life.
Absolutely. And it makes sense too, right? If we have free will within our, human existence, of course, there would be the ability to go in, maybe during astral travel, life between life, maybe regression or some way to go in and make tweaks to that soul contract or that soul blueprint and those contracts within the soul blueprint.
Yeah, and just a reminder for everybody, we have about 10 minutes left or so in the broadcast, give or take, because we always like to follow the energy. If there's like burning questions, like we don't want to like cut people off and like end as long as you have time for it. But now would be the time. If you have a question that's been prompted in the conversation, now's the time to ask that. And if you're listening to this on the replay, on the podcast, know that if you subscribe to the Sonic Shaman YouTube channel, you can catch these broadcasts live and you can be part of the conversation. And if you want to connect with Joe after the broadcast, the website again is www.thewokeakashic.com. And that's the WOKE Akashic is AKASHIC.com. And oh my gosh, I already love like the turns that our conversation has gone down. It's been like things that I never thought would come up, which is really great. Now, what do you do with astrology incorporating it? And we've touched on that briefly. Are there certain things about astrology that you really focus on? Like I like working with progressions with people's solar returns because it's such a huge thing in and of itself. What are things that you really like to incorporate that you find as a theme are most beneficial for people?
Well, listen, Hank, I am not that knowledgeable in astrology. I actually just started learning. But what I incorporate is the sun sign, the rising sign. I'm sorry, the sun sign, the rising sign, and the moon sign. Because 9 times out of 10, the comparison between a numerology core chart and your basic, astrology chart, it's something that blows your mind. So it's very interesting to incorporate those sun, moon, and rising signs, just the qualities, characteristics, that sort of thing with people.
Okay, yeah, because astrology could be like its whole thing. My 2 favorite things to work with is the lunar cycle, because every 28 days people have an element of the moon agitating some sort of past thing for them to work on. And then my second favorite, just to offer it to you, is something called secondary progressions. Whenever somebody has their solar return, the day after their birthday, they're in the energy of when they were 1. The next day after their birthday, they were in the energy of when they were 2. And so like if you're 40 years old, for the 40 days after your birthday, if you're really receptive and you really go after it, you're in the energy of that year of your life, and things that need to be resolved more easily come up. So that's one of my favorite things to work with personally. So I'll give that. It's called secondary progressions.
Secondary progressions. I love that. I learn.
Yeah, it's so good. It's in the like Esoteric Astrology by Alice Bailey work, which is like a 1,400-page book, and you'll hate me if you try to read it. But just take the things that I mentioned and like just run with that, because that's the Cliff Notes version.
Okay. Wow. Great. I love it. I love learning new things. I love it.
Cool. Any questions that you were hoping that I asked? Because you didn't put anything on the sheet, like things that you really, well, you did put one thing. I think we already covered it. Ask about soul blueprints. So why not do a recap, talking again about soul blueprints? And let's throw in too, what about the concept of soulmates? Like, is there only one, or is it just somebody that's blueprint is kind of aligned on the same path? Twin flames, is that a similar thing, a different thing? I don't know if you've really studied any of that, but let's talk a little bit more about the relationships that come into our lives relative to the blueprints.
So we're born into a soul family. And the soul family isn't like our immediate family. Our soul family are, it's maybe 100 people or 100 souls from our soul group. Okay, so souls are grouped into groups, then families, and then from there, within each family, these souls tend to reincarnate over and over and over together. Those soul families are our soul mates. So a soulmate can be mother, father, brother, sister. It's not just a romantic relationship. And basically a soulmate is somebody that we enter into a soul contract with. And it's within that contract that gives us this goal to obtain either in that life or throughout the course of many lives. And they just help us go, attain that goal. Twin flames, though, I would not wish on my worst enemy. No, twin flames are a lot of work, and they're not. They're very romanticized, but they're actually very, very difficult relationships.
Okay, and I have a question here. She's asking, I have a child that in her first few years of life kept referring to another life in China and asking to see that family. Years later now, she doesn't remember. Do you know why?
Yes. So we retain many of our incarnate memories through the age of 7 years old. It's about 7 years old when that third dimensional existence sort of really takes hold, unless that child is nurtured from the very beginning. So if you have a child who's gifted and you nurture that child, teach them meditation and connection with that intuitive, gift, and just really, really, dip them into the woo every day, then yeah, they're going to remember those. And a lot of times too, if you have children that will remember those lives, just ask them questions, say, and get as much detail as you can, because yeah, if that's not nurtured, they'll lose that knowledge base.
Right. And just for everybody's knowledge too, it doesn't necessarily mean like both my kids are very intuitive. My one son, I had a code set by Nintendo that was randomly emailed that was like 12 digits, uppercase, lowercase, and symbols that I had so they couldn't play the Wii. And he just sat down and he was in playing it. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Let's go buy a lottery ticket, But then, so I was teaching him shamanism and all these things. And my oldest says, Daddy, you can teach us all about this when we're older. Right now, let us be kids.
Aww.
Like he had that much awareness to say like, yeah, we're going to be into all that. And they know that all this is, they know about the woo, but they know right now too, they could just be kids and, worry about the woo later.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I believe that through the course of ascension, maybe in 50 years, meditation and, energy management will all be taught in kindergarten and, first grade and second grade. Let's hope anyway. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I was starting to look at your website a little bit. I thought I had it up here too. I thought there was something. Oh, there was like another broadcast. I thought there was something specific that you had that people could reach out to you for, but now I'm forgetting about. Oh, your jewelry. I wanted to touch base on that because you incorporate astrology, like you do a lot of things with custom-made jewelry for people. So I assume that these are kind of like empowerment pieces. And so could you talk a little bit about that, of how something like jewelry or something customized for you and it's not out just mass-produced, how that might help you like step into your path and keep you maybe, staying the course easier?
Yes. So I am a silversmith, and I wanted a way to nurture that love without, feeling obligated. And so I design a piece. For instance, like this is a ring that I designed for myself, but it's labradorite, right? And so the labradorite, in order to get to that stone, I pulled my own numerology chart, and then I also incorporated astrology, and then all of a few of the other signs to get the stone that would most integrate with all of my qualities and help my intuitive abilities, sort of escalate at a higher level. So I do pendants and rings. Typically, that's really what people want. They want either a pendant or they want a ring. So yeah, you can order a custom intuitively designed jewelry piece that will help work with your own individual energy.
Yeah, and I hardly ever wear this, but I have this little talisman on today. And the guy who made it, for the purpose of the talisman, he would fire the clay on a certain day. So astrologically, and it's even on the back, like the time that it was actually fired, I could run a birth chart on my jewelry to see how it would be interacting with my chart. And so like that's a whole nother level of woo with astrology, because you could do like compatibility charts and things like that. Yes. But that would be a whole nother thing. So you could look at someone's birth chart and create the necklace at a time where the birth of the necklace would integrate with their chart. Ooh.
There's so many cool potential possibilities for creating like tangible pieces of art for your clients when you're an intuitive that will help work within their field. There's so many cool things out there.
I think my son they try to come through the back door. And then they saw me streaming. So now they leave. And now they're ringing the doorbell, trying to get my wife to open up the front door because they think they're going to distract me when they come through. They should have just come in, because people probably could hear the doorbell going off a lot. Anyhow. So we just have a few minutes left. We have the website up again, thewokeakashic.com, for people who want to reach out and connect either for a reading, just some intuitive jewelry, or just want to reach out or see some of your other content. Like that's how I found Jo, is she was a podcast guest on another podcast, and I listened to it and I'm like, oh, she's going to be fun to have on, because Akashic Records are so great in and of themselves, but then you had such a broad knowledge base on, underneath that all. So we were able to go places that maybe you couldn't have gone otherwise.
Yeah.
any final thoughts or anything that that you still want to leave everybody with? And really, guys, the last call for questions, you got like 2 minutes if you want to sneak one in.
Oh, wow. Just really, if you are called to develop your own intuition, find a teacher, a book, a class, a work group, find something, because, while I love, my clients and I love helping guide them, really the future is people tapping into their own intuitive abilities so that they can, find their own way using their gut and their knowing. So.
And that gives me a good reason to bring up my acronym for COVID. So I'll throw that up there. It's create opportunities via intuiting divinity. So whatever tool you want to use, folks, pick something and start co-creating with the universe and having life happening through you instead of to you. And everything can and will change with ease. Guaranteed.
Yes. I tell people, it's not that you want to be in the flow. You want to learn how to direct the flow.
Yeah, that brings me to my shamanic teacher. Like, we look at it as you are the conductor of the symphony of the universe, and you're just, sending energy out, because there is only source, and source is dense or heavy or light rather, but it's all still source. And our heaviness is light for something else in the cosmos, as just like angel poop would be light for us. So it's all a matter of perspective. Like, where are you? But it's all source. And if you can just redirect the energies where they're going to be a service, then you're not harming anything. You're just providing light to some other aspect of divinity somewhere out in the cosmos. And it's like such a great thing. Is there you mentioned book, like find a book or anything. What's your favorite book? Like what book has really made an impact for you?
Opening to Channel by Dwayne Packer. And there's another author, and I forget her name. I'm so bummed because it's a female, but Opening to Channel is a great book that teaches you how to connect to your intuitive abilities and channeling.
Cool. And then one of the books I've been reading recently, for those that's an Access Consciousness book by Dr. Dane here. It's called Being You, Changing the World. So now if you don't know where to start, you have 2 books that we mentioned that might be relevant for you. But I want to thank you so much for coming on. I had a blast. I think with your background, we probably can plan another stream if you're open to it. Let us know. Comments, do you want to see more of Jo? I think that there's a lot she can contribute if she wants to come back on. So cool. But thank you, everyone. We will catch you next time. And again, please subscribe. Help spread the contagion of consciousness by sharing this video with your loved ones and people who need it the most. And you can be part of this amazing change that we're creating in the world. See you guys. As soon as I hit the right video. Now we got it. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today for the show. The Sonic Shaman is part of the Emergence of Being Contributor Network. Visit emergenceofbeing.com to learn about all the contributors and learn about our services and upcoming events. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. You can contribute to the show by supporting our efforts and sharing our content with those you care about and those who need it most.